We're foodies at heart at Uzo Talk, which is why we love the Greek providor. Get a real taste of the very best produce that Greece has to offer. From olive oils and delicious artisan sweets, to earthy herbs, memorable wines, warming spirits and more, all made by passionate, independent farmers and producers from across Greece. So whether you're looking to fill your pantry or buy a special gift for a loved one, the Greek providor has you covered. Visit thegreekprovidor.com.au today and bring Greece home.
Sound is.
Nick Athanasiou, we are back for another episode of Uzo Talk, and we have been lucky enough to get another fantastic guest. To say that she's a fantastic guest is an understatement, because she comes very highly recommended by someone that we both know now, don't we?
We do, and what a legend he is. And look, I'm actually really looking forward to listening to this guest. She has given us a bit of a teaser. She's actually jumped out of the Mediterranean to join us today, would you believe?
That's true. That's true. Very, very jealous. I mean, you know, we're stuck in Sydney, which is not particularly warm at the moment. You know, one could say that it's cold by Australian standards. So to see her flowing locks still wet from the Greek Ocean is maddening at this point, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. But look, we've got our friendly little tickle the here to keep us warm for the winter.
That's right.
So we're in good hands.
That's right. But yes, our guest does come very highly recommended. You may have listened to the episode that we had with Stephen Fry. And I mean, obviously we were aware of Victoria's work well before then. But when Stephen said, you have to have Victoria Hislop,
got to get her on.
It was mandatory at that point, wasn't it?
It was. We got to work, and love and behold, we are here today, ready to go.
Absolutely. So I've spoilt it. You know, obviously we do have Victoria Hislop, but let's just be reminded who she is. So Victoria is a best-selling British, but technically Greek author, whose novels have captivated millions of readers globally and have also inspired Greek TV series, including the hugely successful award-winning drama Το νησί, The Island, which had Greek audiences riveted when it aired on Mega. But her connection to Greece goes much deeper than words on a page or stories on screen, because she has a long spiritual connection to the country after first visiting on holiday as a girl. Today she has a house on Crete where she spends a great deal of her time, and in 2020, by decree of then-President of Greece, Katerina Sakellaropoulou, was granted honorary Greek citizenship for providing exceptional services to the country. She studied English literature at Oxford University, building a career in publishing, PR and journalism, one of my people, Nick, travelling the world to write about education and culture for leading newspapers and magazines. In her writing, she's explored the Spanish Civil War, the history of Thessaloniki, the struggles of Cyprus and the scars of Greece's wartime past, all while advocating for literacy, heritage preservation and humanitarian causes. She's a member of the British Committee for the Reunification of the Parthenon Marbles and has been recognised as a Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature. Joining us live from her home in Crete is the incomparable Philhellene Victoria Hislop. Welcome to Uzo Talk.
It's very nice to be with you, and I've got a fairly classic brand with me today.
Vodeka, Uzo 12.
Absolutely. It's obviously in Crete, we drink raki, more like your Tsikulia,
Yes.
so I can warm myself up too. I'll just have a little sip now.
Oh, nice.
A bit strong for the morning. Actually, it's
We're well into it.
amazing how many elderly men, obviously in the Caffania, in the local town, they start the day with a really good slug of raki, and they swear by it. They use it for everything.
Breakfast of champions.
Yeah.
I was going to say, you sound like a true Cretan now. Well done.
Have you ever partaken of that tradition in the morning, or
Well, the only time
after a big night?
I've taken part in this tradition is that the classic thing, 'cause, you know, raki is made sort of at the end of the year in these distilleries, and it's a very informal business. It's not. I've never actually bought raki. It's just something that people make from the residue of their grape skins. So
and it just manifests, right?
Yeah, it literally manifests. And then after that, they put it in old plastic water bottles, which, you know, they've used throughout the year. So there are all these bottles of what look like ordinary water, and someone comes to your house and you say, thank you, you put it in the fridge. And only last week, woke up very thirsty in the morning and took a giant slug of what I thought was water. And it was actually quite shocking. But the weird thing is, it really set me up for the day. I don't think I've ever had such a. It was Happy Monday, It was. I thought I've been missing here something very special.
Isn't it funny though? How we've all got that story. Everything that you just said, we've all had that experience before.
Yeah.
I like to call it artisanal water because that's the traditional bottle that these things come in, isn't it?
Classic,
Yeah,
it is. And it's like our medicine here in winter.
Yeah, it's great stuff. I'll send you some when it's done here. I'll send you a plastic
please
bottle.
do.
Classic.
Actually, you brought one back, didn't you, Nick?
I did. Yeah, look, it's part of the tradition now. You bring back a big bag of oregano and a bottle of cipro.
Right,
I'm from the north of Greece, but
it's all the
and
same.
you keep it in your deep fridge.
That's
Correct.
right.
And
yes.
it never freezes
No,
up.
it's like vodka, except much better.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's easier to distinguish when it's in the deep fridge.
I actually thought that you shouldn't be called Ouzo Talk. You should be called
Many times.
Cipro Talk. Cipro. A bit harder.
Well, we've had this discussion. We've had this discussion many times, haven't we?
We have. We did start in the summer. So in the summer we do drink ouzo. And when the winter kicks in, we sort of transition to Cipro. So we did start the series in October, I think it was. So it was ouzo up until, April, May, and then we sort of transitioned.
That's right. But it doesn't quite have the same same ring to it. Cipro Talk.
And I think it's a bit like a lot of Greek words. It's quite challenging for people to say.
That's right.
Yeah,
it is.
Well done. It's lovely to be on Ouzo Talk.
Thank you. Well, we have to say you're the latest in an illustrious line of Britons who have been on this show, including, as we said, Stephen Fry, but also the great Professor Paul Cartledge from Cambridge, who had recently been on for a third time. And I just can't help but think we're surrounded by so many Britons, and our house in Corfu, for example, is flanked by British people as well, owners who have made that sea change. I mean, what is it about Greece?
Well, when people say, why do you like Greece so much? I just look at them with, probably looks a bit like disdain from where they're sitting. So I think, well, what's not to like about Greece? We've got a long kind of emotional and almost academic connection, with all our studies, right through the past centuries. But right now, I just think it provides the biggest contrast you can have to Britain in terms of how structured and ordered everything really is in the UK. We're quite rule-abiding, and I think there's a little bit of anarchy still left in Greece that people love to tap into. Of course, it's the weather, and if you've got sunshine and you can be by the sea, what's not to like? Food. The wine now is, I've got friends who are such wine snobs, and they come here and they're blown away by what's happening on the wine scene.
True.
Not just across, in I know North Greece has long had a very good reputation, but there are some extraordinarily good vineyards in Crete. So there's nothing missing now. There's food, wine, sunshine, culture,
Life is complete.
Ancient history, music. I mean, that's a big attraction for me, is all the live music. There's something happening even in my local town or in a village during the summer every day with the most incredibly talented musicians, lira players and lauto players. And so, it's just, for me, it's got everything. And it's very hard to go home.
Well, you're painting an amazing picture for us, which I think we're going to dive a little bit more into. So I think this is probably a good time to get into the episode properly. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, definitely. Sounds good. Let's have a drink.
Stiniyamas.
Sinyamas.
Welcome.
Or viva, as they say in Greek. Welcome, Victoria. So, Nick, what are we actually drinking now? Look, we've sat on this bottle for quite a while.
No
but
surprise. No, it is a different one actually.
Oh, is it?
So no surprise. We are back on the 35N. It is winter, like we've mentioned before in the episode. It's a muscat and spinners from the 35N people. Tick with the R. So 38% alcohol, quality stuff, and we're nearly finished. So I think we're due for another bottle.
Yeah, and Victoria, you haven't tried this one. I know they're local to you. Give them a try because you've got access to the best stuff, obviously, which is made in someone's backyard. But
that
this comes
the
very
real
close.
deal. That looks quite scary, actually.
Yeah, they're from Redimno. So
Redimno.
probably not too far from you.
They're in the west, in the west of Crete, but not so far. Actually, this ouzo, which I have, probably not allowed to promote a brand. This is actually 40%. I mean, honestly. And nowadays, the police really crack down here, so you just got to have a teaspoon to keep on the right side of the coppers, as we call them in England.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah, definitely. There's a big change in that now. The police are pulling people over. It didn't happen 10 years ago, but
I've been to fill my car up with petrol locally, and they offer you one for the road. I mean, they literally hand you, and I kid you not, they give you a little glass, and they want to clash a little bit of raki with you. So,
that is
you know,
funny.
I feel personally a little bit sad that that's not going to happen. You know, there are certain rather beautiful anarchic traditions that we've moved into perhaps a more law-abiding era in Greece, but I'm a bit nostalgic for that.
I agree. Well, we have to say that these drinks do come courtesy of the Greek Providore, who is the sponsor of this episode, obviously, Nick, have been on board with us for a very long time now. From the very beginning, yeah. So the greekprovidore.com.au for all of your alcohol-related needs, let's say, right?
And drink responsibly.
That's right. Fantastic. Okay, so I have to say that when my wife found out, who was born and raised in Greece and was in Greece around the time that the island was on TV, when I told her that that we were going to be speaking to you, she's like, you're speaking to who now? Really? She was blown away. So, I mean, talk to us a little bit about, let's start there, because that's what most people in Greece would probably identify with.
Yes, well,
for you.
The Island wasn't a book I planned to write. It was my first novel. And we were here on a family holiday. My kids were about 8, 10 years old then. And every day we tried to do something other than going to the beach, cultural parents. We can't just, hang out and not understand the other side of Greece. But we'd exhausted all the ancient sites. And to be absolutely honest, back then, even I wasn't a big fan of things that I had to imagine how they were 5,000 years ago, with a line of stones on the ground being the evidence of a palace. It does actually quite stretch adults, let alone kids. But I saw in the guidebook a little island that had been a former leper colony. And for some reason, that really connected with me because it had only closed in 1957. And I thought, wow, that's recent. I was born in 1959. So I thought that's not going to seem so ancient, so inaccessible. So off we went, the four of us, and little boat trip, all good. Kids love a boat trip. And when we got to this little tiny island, it takes an hour if you walk very, very slowly to go around the circumference. And as soon as we were walking around it, I felt something really powerful, some kind of connection with it. I'm not I don't gaze into crystals and read the stars. I'm not disbelieving about any of that. I'm very open to pretty much anything, but this literally had a very visceral effect on me, AKA my hair stood on end. So we went away, nice trip, had ice creams, and we actually sat in a restaurant overlooking Spinalonga. And I just thought I have to write a story about this. Back then, I was writing lots of travel journalism. In fact, that was the reason I came to Australia about 20 years ago, was to do a travel
Yeah,
piece,
wow.
which was amazing for me. But I thought, this isn't journalism, it's got to be fiction. I can't even explain that. I'd never even wanted to write a novel. Absolutely
Wow.
not on my horizon at all. But I wrote it, and I felt what I saw, and I'm often not accused, but told by my Greek friends that I see everything through rose tinted glasses, that I see everything very positively. It's quite a nice way to live, and obviously helped
Yeah.
by a little bit of
Not a bad thing.
Cipro. That I saw this as a beautiful place, not as a sort of deeply tragic, miserable place. I mean, obviously, people had gone there and many of them had died, but they had clearly lived some kind of joy while they were there, because there was a bakery, there was a church, there was a cafe, all the remnants of it, derelict.
Yeah.
So I wrote this novel, and obviously, the conclusion of it is that there's a cure. And it's also a love story, because even where you have places of, deep misery, people still fall in love. These are the facts of life. It's a human need, to try and find the best in your situation. So wrote the book, uh, thinking that, I'd fulfilled something I felt a need to do. And then within a few months of it coming out in Greece, I had this approach from Mega TV. I'd rejected already various approaches from what I call unsuitable directors, waving large amounts of money at me, who clearly wanted to make a horror film, a kind of, like a
Okay.
zombie thing. And that would be very easy to do, because some of the things that happen to people with leprosy, terrible things can happen to their faces. And I wasn't interested. That was the absolute opposite of what I'd been trying to convey. So Mega came along, the head of Mega, who was or is a man called Petros Boutos, and we had a very swift drink in the Hilton in the middle of Athens. And he said, my mother, I haven't read this, he said, but my mother has read it and she likes it. And I thought, well, I already knew that if somebody's mother liked something, then the son would go, okay, mum, I'll make a TV series. So, to my astonishment, within a few months, we were writing the scripts, and 26 episodes, which was mega in
Wow.
itself. And it went out probably maybe 2 years after that. It was all quite speedy. And it resonated with the Greek audience in the most extraordinary way. Partly because at that time we just hit the moment when Greece was going into a crisis. And obviously it was an act of kind of some faith on the part of Mega TV to continue with it, because about halfway through, the country was practically melting down financially. But we kept going. So I think people who watched it at 10 o'clock every Monday night, when the streets literally went quiet, people felt they identified with the suffering and the courage and the
Yeah.
kind of let's keep going attitude of all these people I was describing. So I think that was the thing when the stars kind of aligned. And not to mention, or should mention, the incredible acting talent that we had. We had some really top Greek names like Stelios Minos and I can't even list them, because there were so many. And if they weren't stars when they came on board, they became stars. So it was just the most fantastic experience filming it, and then the reception of it was just joyful to feel that people had found not just entertainment, because it was more than that. It was very powerful, and yeah.
Brilliant.
So yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
The thing about that series, there's only a few TV series from Greece that I can sort of think of that have had the same sort of impact. The most recent probably being Maestro in Blue
Yeah.
through Netflix. I mean, I would put it at the same sort of level of fervor in many respects. What do you think it was that made the Greeks identify with that story and, you know, become such rusted on followers of it?
Well, interesting about Maestro in Blue, because I love that too, and that showed in some ways the most gorgeous image of a Greek island, didn't it? It was almost visually the antithesis of the island, Tonisi. As I say, I think it was the timing. I think there was a lot of real deep anxiety in Greece at that time, and suddenly they were watching this very beautifully shot, quite dark, quite moody series that just, it's a bit like when you're feeling sad, you often want to listen to sad music. You can't go, oh, I'm going to listen
Great
to
point.
the Beatles, some hit that is very up. You want to kind of slightly wallow in the emotion that you're already holding, something a little bit, just so you can have a good sob. I think a lot of
Great
people
point.
cried, um, either at the end. The music was amazing. It didn't hold back at all emotionally. It was written by Minos Matsas, who's a very talented man, a very good friend of mine, and he really felt it. And a really significant thing for me was that he spent a lot of time out here on the set. So it wasn't just, receiving the rushes of a TV series and just sort of vaguely matching something up. He was actually here feeling it. And the theme tune, which was written and performed by Yanis Haroulis, he's a local here. I don't know, does he come to Greece ever to play? But he's a massive star here, and his father was in the series. So we had
Right.
there were no, there was a lot of reality mixed in with fiction. A lot of very
Amazing.
people who came to visit the set were emotional. Everyone was emotional without
Wow.
crying into their ouzo every minute, but there was a lot of genuine emotion. And I should mention there
Wow.
was I'd almost call him the mascot of the series. I mean, it was dedicated to him in the end. An elderly gentleman called Manoli Frundulaikis, who lived opposite Spinalonga, and years back he'd had leprosy. He hadn't been sent to Spinalonga, he'd been sent to a hospital in Athens, but he lived opposite. He was very, I don't want to say he was deformed by it, because I never saw him that way, but his face had been radically altered by having leprosy. But he was the most kind, wonderful, funny, wise man. And every actor, every technician, everyone on the creative and production side used to go and see him all the time. He would be at his house, and actually he always had his homemade raki. And whenever you went to see him, his house would be full of the cast, of the crew. And he gave it this, again, absolute reality and sensitivity. That was very important. No, everybody knew a real person who'd had this disease, and that was Manoli. They weren't just imagining. Manoli was almost their starting point for being involved.
Wow.
They would go, he was a guru, really. There's not a word good enough for him. He was an extraordinarily clever and wise man. But as I say, very, very noticeably had suffered from the disease. So, yeah. I could write a book about.
Brilliant.
I could write a book about the book and a book about the series. Actually,
Well, the way you're describing him is almost like that character from Kazantzakis, you know, the Zorba the Greek uncle. Oh, I can't remember what he's.
yes,
You know, he was the guru. He was like the Yoda of the story, who wasn't in the film, but you know, same sort of thing.
Yes.
You know, wise old Cretan man,
wise, very
who
wise.
was everything.
Yes.
So how long did it take you to research the book, and how did you go about researching before you started to write it?
Well, at the time, I didn't speak a word of Greek. I could say kalimera, but that's often sounded a bit like calamari, you know, in a restaurant where you order calamari. And so I often had a plate of calamari without having really ordered it. So that was as basic as my Greek. I realised straight away that either I was going to have to learn the language and become acquainted with everything about the area, the island, the people, etc., or I was going to get on with it and use my imagination. And I was very impatient, so I decided I would write it without learning the language, which, you know, I'd probably still be learning the language now and wouldn't have written the book. So in terms of the place itself, I literally used my imagination. The characters were just those who came to me, whereas the science of the disease was something I knew I could get to grips with. So I found one of the world's leading experts who's based in London at the London School of Hygiene, and Professor Diana Lockwood. And she not only explained how leprosy develops and how it spreads, but she lent me these two textbooks, one from the 1930s that sort of took me into the 40s, and then the one from the 40s that goes into the 50s. So these books actually took me right into the mentality of the thinking and all the, in a way, all the mistakes and all the desperate attempts to treat that were happening in one period and then flowing into the next. So I could understand how terrifying this disease and how misunderstood it was. So they were very, very, very important texts to me. And they were her kind of crumbling first editions that she, you know, they were so precious. I used to lock them in a fireproof cabinet every night. But they really kind of fueled my understanding of the thinking of that period. So I wasn't kind of being the wise 21st century person looking back with hindsight. I could imagine myself in the period. What was really good was with the TV series, obviously that we had a couple of researchers who then did some research that I would have done if I'd spoken the language. And that was more to do with, you know, the details, like who actually prevented people on Spinalonga escaping, because it was a place that people at points would have wanted to leave. So I didn't have a way of finding that out when I was writing, but what they discovered for the TV series was that life sentence prisoners from a, you know, hardcore prison, probably murderers, were given an option. Either you stay in this prison all your life, or would you like to be a guard on a leprosy island? Can you imagine? And this actually happened. What a detail. I mean, I would definitely for sure have put that in the book. So that became a very, you know, the mean, nasty, the baddie on the island was one of these guards who was obviously a guy with nothing to lose, a cruel, brutal, you know, it really added drama, which was great for TV. So I think the TV series was furnished with more details of that kind. So, but in the book itself, I wanted it to be utterly imaginary take on what that place had been like, based on the remaining infrastructure and the atmosphere. That was what I kind of read, if you like. That's what I interpreted. And that's being a novelist, that's what writing fiction is about. It's letting your mind just like go wherever it wants.
Look, I've never actually seen this series, but I've looked at Internet Movie Database, and it rated at 9.1, which is huge.
Yeah, it had
it's up there with, some of the classic movies that are out there.
It's up there with Shawshank.
Oh,
exactly.
Maybe in Greece, yeah. They say it had, it was second in audience rating or ranking or numbers to the final of the Euros when Greece won, which was, really, that was like the best day ever in Greece.
Yeah.
Even for me.
We've had 3 of those boys on the show.
Have you? Oh, wow.
We have.
They are low.
And it was interesting, just a little tidbit for you, because we love telling this story, because Nick here sat on this couch back in 2004. There's a couch right here facing the TV. And watching those games, and then and he told the story so beautifully. Somewhere in the sands of time, had he known that he would look around and those 3 crucial players from that team would be sitting at this table speaking.
They didn't all come together, did they?
They did.
They came together. Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, they're here for a tour. There's a couple of soccer clinics, and we managed to get them, and it was a great story, great episode.
But a great analogy.
Amazing, amazing.
I have a writer's question, Victoria, because, listening to a lot of, because, I've got a background in journalism and write and whatnot, but how frustrating is it going from being a journalist to then going into writing fiction? Is there a push-pull for you between, okay, I'm used to writing the facts, or I'm used to writing, for news or features or whatever the case is, to then move into having so much freedom?
Yeah. I'd say...
What was that like?
I would describe it as like the difference between walking, which is journalism, and flying. Because with flying, if just to probably overstretch the analogy, you're still looking down at the reality. Because perhaps more so, all the books I've written since the island have quite a structured historical base, i.e. modern Greek history, by and large, apart from the Spanish Civil War. So I have a really, quite a fixed timeline. So I've always got that to hold on to, so I'm flying up there, but I can kind of see the airport. I can see where I'm going to land, and it's got to be accurate. But no, it's great. Fiction's such a joy to do. My only real problem with it, if any, is that your deadline is so far away quite often. And there is something deeply satisfying, because I still do some journalism, deeply satisfying when someone says, I want 1,000 words by the end of the week. And it's so lovely to have that arc of beginning, research, write, finish, send, within a week, as opposed to 3 years later, No, I think a combination of the two is a really fun combo.
Look, you might have touched on it earlier, but what was one of your earliest memories of Greece? And where was the first time you went to Greece, and whereabouts was that?
First time was with my mother and my sister, and we went in probably 77. I think it was 1977. I can never quite remember. It was 76, 77 anyway, not long after the end of the junta. So without realising it, I think we were kind of going into a Greece that was breathing and kind of having fun again. And we went to Athens for a week, which was mind-blowing, because I'd been out of England once before. So, I wasn't a child that had been all around the Mediterranean, going to every capital city. Travel wasn't such an easy thing in the 70s. So to land in this dusty, chaotic, just amazing city, literally with, the Parthenon vaguely over there above you that you glimpse. I mean, it was like being in a storybook for me. And I rather loved the heat, and I really liked the chaos. I don't know why, but it just appealed to me. In the square brackets, my sister, who's only a year and a half older than me, didn't like it at all. She's been back to Greece once, very reluctantly, to see me in Crete, like how many years later? Is that maybe 40 years later? So it doesn't have the same effect on everyone. So we went to Athens, did all the sites, got very hot, were flirted with a lot by Greek waiters then. It was the time before, it was the time of the unreconstructed Greek male, not quite bottom pinching, but, outrageous flirtation, which again, I thought, oh, this is nice. British waiters don't do this. They're being really flirty, lovely. As a teenage girl, you've never experienced anything like it. And then we took the boat to Paros for our second week, which was just the contrast, the absolute contrast, because Paros then didn't have an airport. It was very undeveloped, really beautiful, blue sea. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. And I remember picking up tiny, tiny shells, everything was magical. So very, very, very fond memories of that trip. And it was the beginning of this really what I'd call a love affair. No other word for it, really.
So when you were able to start going by yourself? How old were you and what inspired it, I guess? Were you always thinking, I want to go back to Greece?
Oh, yes, absolutely. No, I think my next trip, because I think I was probably 17 when I went for that first trip, 16, 17. So I went after the end of my first year at university. There were a gang of us. I think there were 11 of us, because I remember I think there's 11 in a cricket team. Is that right?
Yeah,
I knew you'd know. So
We're Australian. The Ashes are coming up.
We're warming up for the Ashes.
I don't think I'm allowed to mention cricket as an English person. But anyway, so 12 of us went off from university just to travel around by bus. And, we slept on beaches, we had hostels. It was the roughest trip you could imagine. But, very, very back, it would have been 1980. And there was a charm, definitely a little bit of something that Greece is beginning to lose, I think. But really went to sites, archaeological sites and temples where there was nobody else there. Hopped on and off buses, decided where we were going to go at the beginning of the day, and we're very rowdy. I think we were probably very rowdy. And I remember watching maybe it was 81, Diana and Charles getting married, I remember it so distinctly, sitting in a very cheap taverna somewhere with a big TV up on the wall in the corner, and we were all watching the royal wedding on this TV. That's a very particular memory, and thinking, wow, I feel worlds away from that, but I'd rather be here. I remember feeling a bit like, oh, she's the same age as me, and she's wearing that meringue of a dress, and here are we all free and easy, wearing practically nothing in Nafplion.
Wow.
So that was the second, and then I went the next year, and literally I've started going every single year somewhere, just never stopped. Travelled, I did a lot of travel writing, so I always kind of went other places, as I say, came to Australia. But holidays or vacations were always in Greece.
So were you always looking for opportunities to go back? I mean, would an assignment come up? You were like, yes, I'm going.
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, it's a magnet to me, in spite of the fact that, Italy culturally and aesthetically is a very beautiful country. And, I love going there as well, but for different things. But the sense of natural, the sense of well-being that I think I get in Greece doesn't compare with being in France or Spain or Italy. to me, there's something, a simple sense of extreme well-being that I think certainly a Greek island can give you.
We can all attest to that, I think.
Yeah.
Nick's in the throes of the depression that comes from coming back at the moment.
I'm
Sorry.
coming out of it now.
Sorry, no, it is. It's hard.
It's been a month.
It is hard.
It is,
I usually
definitely.
cry as the airplane's taking off.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then cry with
there you
joy
go.
when it's landing, coming back in. No, I'm absolutely... People always think, oh, why is that woman snivelling? What's wrong with her? She broken up with a boyfriend or something, and I'm just snivelling because I'm leaving Greece. Simple as that.
So
It's great that you can understand that, because we can't explain it to people here. People have never been, what is wrong with you? It's just a holiday. but
Well,
it's not
especially
just
for
a
you
holiday.
two, it's that word nostalgia, which is sort of a Greek word, obviously, like most poetic words, and it's that ache for the homeland, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it is.
Absolutely.
You literally,
Well, it is,
you literally ache. It's almost a physical feeling of being ripped away from somewhere and then aching for it when you're not there. No, I mean it's
Well,
strong.
the thing is, sure. But the thing is, I was never born in Greece. My first time was when I was 21. And I don't know what it was. I felt that instant connection. Maybe I thought because my ancestors were from here, but
Yes.
there's something physical about it that you do get upset when you leave.
Yeah, gosh.
So, and you've sort of articulated it there a little
See,
bit.
I'm on the
love
other
it.
side of that because I
You
went
are.
a lot growing up.
Yeah.
I was born here, but went a lot growing up, every few years, and had connections over there and whatnot. Ended up marrying someone from there.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's more powerful coming from you to know that you can, who was not born there, who is not technically Greek, although you are really, let's be honest. But
We'll get into that now. Yep.
yeah. But, I want to ask you, based on that, I mean, you're the type, we know now, you're the type that will cry upon leaving and then coming back feeling that joy. Are you a Philhellene or are you Greek in your mind?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
We're foodies at heart at Uzo Talk, which is why we love the Greek providor. Get a real taste of the very best produce that Greece has to offer. From olive oils and delicious artisan sweets, to earthy herbs, memorable wines, warming spirits and more, all made by passionate, independent farmers and producers from across Greece. So whether you're looking to fill your pantry or buy a special gift for a loved one, the Greek providor has you covered. Visit thegreekprovidor.com.au today and bring Greece home.
I feel really Greek now. I don't feel British. I haven't felt British, or definitely when Brexit happened. I felt pushed out emotionally by that, because I thought, actually, what I really feel is European. If someone said, what's your identity? I would say, well, I'm European, but within that European umbrella, I am Greek. But I'm a lucky Greek, because a born and bred Greek who lives in Greece 12 months of the year, 365, is generally not quite so content with the country as I am. That has to be said. There's a lot of real discontent and criticism. Do I feel Greek or Philhellene? Well, I can't actually be a Greek without suffering in the way that a Greek suffers. And I can just, I'm fortunate, I have one foot outside it. Anyway, that's me on whether I'm a Greek or not a Greek. No, I have the privilege, weirdly, of not being a Greek fully.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting way of looking at it, isn't it, Nick?
It is, definitely. You speak fluent Greek.
I do, yes.
And how did that come about?
And here comes the test.
Yes, here comes the test. We can speak. Μιλήσουμε ελληνικά. Μπορούμε.
Αν θέλετε, πολύ ευχαριστώ.
Τέλεια.
We won't test you, Victoria. We believe you.
Όλοι οι θεατές θα φύγουν. Λοιπόν,
So, how did you find it? Was
well,
it easy to learn?
no,
Was it
very
challenging?
difficult. That's the
What
other
was it?
time I used to cry a lot in my Greek lessons. It's deeply difficult and perverse. It's actually rather like many Greeks themselves. It's very complex, it's very difficult, and it's perversely complex. You know how quite often in life things will, let's say even a river, it will erode a pathway for itself just to kind of go the easiest way possible. It will get rid of that rock in the middle by smoothing it down so that the rock's no longer there. The Greek language just goes in its complex way with all its declensions and conjugations, etc. However, I don't think you can really get to know a country without the language. I mean, the Brits think they can by talking English very loudly to people as though they're very stupid, and I hear it all the time here that someone will, think that by ordering something in a loud voice, then the foreign other person will understand what they're saying. So I'm not one of those English people. And I started learning actually in the Hellenic Centre in London because I thought,
wow.
where can I really focus on this? And I went 3 times a week for private lessons, 2 hours each time. And I made pretty fast progress. And within a year or so, I could just about do an interview on the, on a stage when I was talking about my books, if I was prepared. So every time I did any event, I moved forward a bit. So I started maybe, is it 10 years, 15 years ago, probably now. And I mean, I think it's a lifetime's work. Let's say Kathimerini, which is the sort of the equivalent of the Times of London here, they write in quite a complex style, so I'll need my dictionary. But a simple, and I can read books now, and it's very helpful for research that I can now, pick up a history book and find what I want. But yeah, it's not an easy language.
Was it harder than going on Dancing with the Stars in Greece?
Actually, probably no. No, I think that was the toughest, physically the toughest. I cried a lot on that too, now I think about it. Every time I'm challenged.
So you're very Greek. That's Greek to me, Tom.
I have a tantrum. No, that was challenging. Really good fun. But yeah, that was great, but tough. But all the things in life that are worth doing, they present a challenge, don't they? Otherwise,
of course,
they're a bit dull. No, that was an amazing experience. Really loved it.
Wow.
I heard you did really well too. So.
Well, I wasn't.
Yeah, we both.
Kudos to that.
Yeah, I was about halfway through. I was still there. It was respectable, and by the kind of end of my time, I was actually more than ready to. I was so bruised and aching that I went home. That was the only time I was glad to leave Greece, because I'd been there for 3 months, training and dancing and the rest of it. It was really full on, and I was kind of exhausted at the end. And I remember going, I had to pretend I was sad to be chucked off, when they said, and now Telemachos ke Victoria. Θα φύγετε. And I was going, oh yes. And I had to kind of...
Thank God.
Thank God for that.
So those they were tears of joy, were they?
Yeah, tears of actual relief.
Yeah.
Went home with rugby injuries, right?
I did.
Well, I want to ask an off-script question, because we've touched on something very important with the language. You probably wouldn't know this, Victoria, but we recently conducted a debate on the Greek language and whether it's essential to Greek identity. Now, it was interesting hearing what you said earlier about not really being able to, I don't want to misquote you, we can go back and listen to it, but not really being able to get into the language and the culture, into the culture without the language. One of the questions that was posed there was, can you effectively be Greek without language, which is a huge question in the diaspora.
Yeah.
From your perspective as an outsider to some degree, what are your thoughts on that?
Wow, it's quite a big question, actually, because if you think about people who want to come and live, let's say want to come to live in Greece, we're talking about, immigrants, do you only wait until they can speak the language before you give them the right to live somewhere? It's quite a big political question. At least you're not saying, do you have to be Greek Orthodox? Because that would have been, back in the day, Nick might not know this, but on your identity, it was a big controversy, your ID card. You had to say what your religion was. Do you remember that, Tom? And you basically, in order to be considered or identified on your ID card as Greek, the right answer was that you were Greek Orthodox. So that was a whole other thing. That has now gone. There's no space where you write your religion. So that was a big thing in Greece. I think you can be. I think you... I'm really sitting on the fence here, but...
It's something. It's interesting because we found before everyone came into that debate, it was very clear that everyone thought that the Greek language is absolutely essential to Greek identity.
Yes.
And the negatives managed to sway half the audience.
Oh, but I'd love to.
It ended up in a draw.
Yeah, no, I can see
it's
why.
a very difficult question to answer, and it's very triggering for a lot of people to, the suggestion that we can allow the language to sort of falter, as it is in some respects in the diaspora, because it is less and less kids are learning Greek.
Is that so?
The longer,
yeah, I think that's sad, though. I think it's like having a sort of enormous bowl of, your favourite dessert or a bowl of sweets, something really delicious that's there and available, and you're passing it around, and people saying, "Oh, not for me," I think language is so rich. The Greek language is so rich and is so influential on so many other languages that it's a waste not to learn it. But then it requires a lot of effort, time, and kind of desire to do it. And I guess that it's something, because I'm a writer, I love language. Not everybody does love language in the way that others do. But to actually make it a prerequisite for being Greek, I think you'd have to make exceptions. So I would be silly, but I can see why the debate was a little bit split, or it wasn't like a universally agreed factor. It's a very, very naughty one. Very naughty.
Yeah. Well, we were surprised, weren't we?
We were. And even some of we can probably let the cat out of the bag, but some of the debaters who were against the language deep down said, look, it is important to learn the language.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, they did.
But it helps you with certain things, history and experiences with history and the language and the food and all that sort of stuff. So
yes,
it does help.
it certainly
learning science and maths
helps, but whether it can actually make you Greek, I think that's a very, very, very astonishingly complex question, and I'm going to think about it.
And the thing is, we've probably caught you off guard.
No, it's a really good one. But no, I think I would probably might have to abstain in that debate, which you're allowed to in a debate. It is not cowardly, but I'd love to. Can I watch the debate? Is it broadcast?
We'll send you the link. You can.
Yeah, I would
We'll send you the link to listen to it.
Love to hear what people said, and then I'll let you know what I would have voted.
Fantastic.
Sounds good.
Beautiful.
Well, so you've written 11 books, and 10 of them are connected to Greece, I guess. So what drew you to, touch on, Greece's dark past? Because a lot of them are all on the Cyprus invasion. I think it was World War II was another.
Yeah, Civil War.
Thessaloniki Civil War.
Yeah,
the junta.
the Jewish story.
What draws you to write those stories about that? Before we start picking on one of the books that we can talk about.
Well, I went to university, went to Oxford. Excellent place to go. And studied for 3 years. And about the only thing I came away with, I had a nice time and I worked hard. But the only thing that I really remember from it is that drama is conflict. That always stuck in my mind, more or less nothing else.
Wow.
Now, I'm not saying it was a wasted 3 years, obviously, but that was the thing I learned, that in any drama, you've got to have a conflict. That's true in life, isn't it, as well? So for me, Greek 20th century is so full of conflict. I mean, the Greeks, I'm just written the latest chapter for the book I'm writing now, and, you know, this old Greek is trying to sort of justify the civil war to a younger person. And he just says, well, you know, 2 Greeks, 1 argument, you know, and you will know it as well as I do from being in Greece a lot, that people always look like they're having a big row, don't they? They very quickly fall into not what sort of a civilized, polite debate, but, you know, shouting and drama. And, you know, you extend that, and then you have a lot of quite deep rifts, different ones, you know, from the, you know, the argument in earlier part of the 20th century, the Merali schisma, the big divide, you know, royals versus, you know, liberals, and all these things. All the time there's been a, you know, and then obviously the Civil War, lots of conflict, so lots of drama. So when I've been reading about the 20th century, I thought, well, how did this actually affect the ordinary person, and particularly women? Because right up until, well, actually in the Civil War, you did have women fighting, but generally the politicians are male, and the women are on the kind of receiving end, having to survive the decisions made by the men. So division everywhere, conflict everywhere, drama everywhere, the question of how people survive everywhere. What better material for a novelist? You know, I've never actually looked for an idea for a book. They fly at me all the time. So that's why I write about the 20th century. I've got no interest at all in writing about classical mythology. That's too far away. I can't imagine it.
Too far away.
Yeah, far back.
Let's leave that for Stephen.
Yeah. No, that's. I'm not
that.
going into his patch. Just have another sip of mine.
Classic. Nice. So, do you have a favourite? Probably a tough question, but do you have a favourite out of the 11 books you've written?
Pick your children.
God,
Favourite child.
yes, it is. They are.
Maybe
like
top
looking
2?
at them on my shelf here. I found The Thread, which was my 3rd novel.
Okay.
I think the most, that for me was a very big emotional kind of story. I'm not Jewish, but it really affected me reading about what happened to the 60,000 Jews that lived in Thessaloniki, that because of the fact they were living all in, you know, in this one city, and they were the lion's share of the Jewish population in entire Greece. It was very easy for the Nazis to move them up to Auschwitz and others. And that was a very affecting story to write. But not only that, it was the way in this period of effectively 20 years, that great city, you know, lost its Muslims, then it lost its Jews, and it became, you know, homogeneously Christian city. sort of ethnically cleansed, as we would call it now. And it was an extraordinary story that nobody would make up, what happened there. But then if you imagine yourself into a Muslim character, a Jewish character, and then a Greek Orthodox character, those stories almost write themselves for me. And the other one, I think, the one I'm writing now is sort of, for me, very deeply engaging. But the two ago, I wrote one called Those Who Are Loved, which was very focused around the Civil War. And again, the Civil War, gosh, you look back on it, it was the, Civil War biggest part between 46 and 49. But then at the end, for like 50 years, 60 years, it has this long tail. A civil war it's not like an occupation where they leave and however much damage they've done, the occupiers have gone. In a civil war, the two conflicting sides are still coexisting in the same town, sometimes the same village, in the same country.
Same street.
So all that for me is pretty electrifying, and how they deal with that afterwards. So yeah, the thread and Those Who Are Loved, I think are, I don't really have favourites because I'm always so kind of keen on the one that I'm writing now, and always hoping that the one, I'm sure all novelists feel that they hope the one they're writing now is better than the one before, you hope you're improving in your art or whatever you call it. It's not really, it is sort of art, but you hope you're honing your writing
Definitely.
skills. It's not like being a cricketer or a tennis player that you probably reach a peak and then you go down. As a writer, I think you can hope to get better.
Probably to go a little bit deeper on that question as well, because a couple of seasons ago we had Dr. Leon Saltiel on the show.
Oh, did you?
Yes, we
amazing.
did. Do you know him?
No, but I've read his writing, obviously.
Yes. Amazing writing. And that's why I want to ask this question, because there are so many, during the course of your research, were there any story, and I mean, not particular to the Thessaloniki, Jewish story, but are there any stories from your research for any of these books that have really had an effect on you? That one, obviously, Dr. Leon Saltiel and that particular story comes to mind, obviously, but across any of your research.
Gosh, well, everything I read has an effect, even if I'm angry because I think they're taking like the wrong side. It's quite easy to find books that will not, obviously with the Holocaust, nobody sort of writes saying that was a good thing, but I think it's sometimes actually, if I have to think of an example, sometimes a photograph that really bangs something home. And during the Nazi occupation, there was a massacre in a village called Distomo, and it's almost too horrifying to describe, but they sort of slaughtered villagers and they slaughtered animals. It was a kind of vengeful thing towards the end of the occupation when they knew, it was nearly all over. And some of the German soldiers took photographs. This is why, they created their own evidence for the atrocity. They took photographs of themselves, with corpses in the background. I mean, so disgusting. Absolutely. I mean, a photograph can actually, it's a cliche, but speak 1,000 words, can't it? And there's quite a famous photograph, but it's often, again, evidence of the Jews in what's now known as Eleftheria Square in Thessaloniki, where they were sort of forced to do exercises in the heat, totally pointless physical exercises. They were sort of rounded up and almost made to perform. And, that's there. That's a photograph. And it's not faked. In those days, they didn't have deep fake. It is real.
Yeah.
So you don't need many photographs like that. But they really, sometimes they really stick in your mind in a way that you quite like to erase them, but they're harder to erase than words, weirdly, because one can read, how much does one read to research a book? Maybe millions of words, but something stamped on your retina. Yeah, and any memoir of the Thessaloniki Jews is horrifying, but sometimes it's a photo.
Did you ever meet any resistance fighters on either end as part of your research?
I did, yes. I've met a couple. Now, I think, not sure now they're still alive, but I'm slightly obsessed with an island called Makronissos, which has come up. It was mentioned in the thread. It's a little tiny mention. It's very much mentioned in Those Who Are Loved, and it's kind of being mentioned again in my latest book, which is an island of exile where they sent sort of stubborn resistors before, during, and after the Civil War. And then again, some people were sent there, I think, to one of these similar islands during the Junta period. And I've met a couple of people who were imprisoned there. And, what's incredible is that they physically survived the sort of torture that they went through there, let alone, were prepared to describe it. So, yeah, I mean, there were some very, very courageous people. And again, there are photographs. I wouldn't even want to show them to you. There's a photograph in a book that I'm going through at the moment and you can't even imagine that this picture was even taken, but it's a photograph of a man who died during torture. And this was a man who was in the resistance, but during the time of these security battalions, which were men recruited by the Nazis. So they essentially hunted down resistance fighters with the backing of the Nazis. So these are Greeks, and they signed up to something called the security battalions. And this picture that I just saw last night when I was reading is a man who was tortured by the security battalion. So that's a Greek that's been tortured by a Greek. And again, there's a lot of words in this book, but it's this photograph that's particularly, shocking and disgusting, and evidence of what happens. That. In fact, I got into a bit of we call it a Barney in English. Well, I don't know if you use it in Australia, that expression.
Yeah, we do.
But it's sort
Barney
of
rubble.
It's kind of
Yeah.
it's actually an argument, but it's with a friend. So you try and soften the word, and actually it was a full-on argument. But this friend who I actually showed him this photograph, and he said, yes, but if Greece had been I said, this is why the Civil War happened, because there were Greeks who'd fought against resisted the Nazis, and there were Greeks who didn't resist the Nazis. So is it a surprise that afterwards the ones who'd resisted were so angry that, they were just swept out of the way, and people who'd been collaborators were put in positions of, they weren't denigrated. They were, some of them were, obviously, but there were others who had worked with the Nazis who were in some way rewarded, who were going to form part of the next kind of
Interesting.
government. And I said, this is why the Civil War happened, because there was all this resentment. And look at this picture. And, I got a long kind of, not lecture, but someone who felt, well, we couldn't have Greece being communist. And I agree with that. Obviously, it would have been a disaster. It's hard to imagine what Greece would be like if it had become one of the Soviet bloc, essentially, because it could have happened. So, yeah, the long term, sorry, this is very densely political, but
No, it's fine. It's good.
people can still
Good
feel
insights.
really strongly about this matter. And yet, when you see a picture of a Greek who's been tortured by a Greek, it's very, very chilling, and one never wants such a thing to happen again.
And that was always when speaking to people of that generation and after, they would all say the same thing. This is, this was far worse than any world war.
Yes,
far
much
more
worse,
painful,
much more destructive, and many more people died than died in the occupation. So it left a huge amount of damage. It's amazing how Greece recovered, as in the way it did.
Yeah.
But it
At all.
still, left a lot of scars. What happened to the people in the security battalions afterwards? I suppose they had it on their conscience that they might have played that role. But everybody, in some way, at any one point, thinks that they're doing the right thing. And I don't want to judge anyone, but I will judge the Nazis who exterminated the Jews of Thessaloniki. That is always the black and the white, whereas the Civil War was extremely complex and, as they always are, causes what I would call Barneys. Although the Greek wouldn't call it a Barney.
For sure. Well, I want to change tact a little bit because obviously more recently you were given the very high honor of being made an honorary Greek citizen by, specifically by the former president of the Hellenic Republic, Katerina Sakelaropoulou. Talk to us a little bit about how that came about. Like, was it a phone call? Was it a letter? Were you looking for citizenship? How did this work out?
Well, it was a dream because particularly during that period of lockdown, when we really didn't know, again, we can look back on hindsight and know it was kind of okay in the end. But in the middle of it, right in the kind of epicenter of COVID, when we couldn't travel, I had to really distract my mind from this terrible fear that I might never be able to go to Greece again because I had no right to go. And so it was quite it was a very black thought for me. And then in the summer, July 2020, I think it was the 11th, I had a phone call from Mitsotakis, actually, to say that they would like to give me Greek citizenship. So
just casually.
It was a bit casual.
Prime Minister.
I kind of vaguely expected it because some other stranger had rung me and asked me some very odd question, like, in what town was I born? And I thought, this is quite a specific question. Something's up. So I knew something was up, but I didn't quite know, what. But I thought...
They didn't ask for banking details.
No, they did. Could I send my fingerprints? So anyway, very next day, and I know Mitsotakis' voice, because I listen to Greek radio and I look at the TV and, I'm pretty au fait. And he does have a very distinctive voice. There's no other Greek that speaks like that. So I knew it wasn't a joke radio station, some Australian radio station ringing to, have a laugh. So we had a nice little chat and I was like trying not to like faint with joy. And so that happened. And I said, thank you very much. We had a little chat. And then as soon as I could, literally when things opened up, I went over in September. I wanted to do it very quickly. I was in a hurry in case, things shut down again. So I went over and met Mrs. Sakalaropoulou, who was very charming. And obviously, I particularly loved her because she was a woman and the first female president. And I felt very full of admiration for her. I mean, I absolutely hats off to Mrs. Sakalaropoulou for doing that job and, in such a male world. So it was very thrilling to meet her. And then I had my audience with Mr. Mitsotakis and, of course, took the opportunity to give him a copy of one of my books, as you do when you're an author. And then we had this where I had to say the oath, which did feel very serious because I think most Greeks here that I know, they never have to speak an oath, saying that they will do their duty and, the orkizo and the kathikonda and all these things that as a person becoming a Greek, I meant it very seriously. And I still mean it seriously. If there was a call up, I would join the army. I'm a bit annoyed I'm too old to have to do national service, but I would do it. Think of the material for a novel. I would love to be. I'd love to do my national service. So
surely there's a communications role in the army.
Yeah, maybe. It was very, very exciting. It was a fabulous day for me, like in a dream. I was literally in a dream to go from my oath to the president to the prime minister. And then again, because it was still lockdown, it was all done in masks. So, everything when you look back on it was all so strange. And then I came over to Crete, where I'm kind of registered as a citizen, and got my passport and my identity card. And again, these were real evidence of becoming a Greek citizen, and I'm immensely proud of it. And it's my most precious possession, my Greek passport. And then, of course, like anything in Greece, there's got to be a humorous side. So my kind of 3 hours in the police station, because British people wouldn't know that for a passport in Greece, you go to the police station. It's kind of incredible place you try and keep away from. But here I am. And they were all so friendly and so funny. And so, I've made them into characters in one of my books. They are in some ways immortalized. And there was a massive, this is where we had a row, even in the police station, because you have to fill in what colour your eyes are. Now, in England, my eyes are brown because that's the colour they are. Here, however, because Greeks have these amazing chocolate brown, really brown eyes, the colour of 90% hardcore chocolate. So all these policemen were coming and giving their opinion on what colour my eyes were, even though we were wearing masks and it was like distancing time. They were all no, they're green, and then they're kind of all sorts of other colours. So they were all practically having a civil war about what I was going to write in my form. And I was just standing there, and it was just hilarious. I was trying not, I was laughing. In the end, we put green. Yeah. In the end, apparently I have. Crazy. And then the same thing happened the other day when I went to renew. There was a big debate about whether my eyes were green, brown, or some other shade of, mud. It was lovely. And actually this week when I went to renew, Manoli, he's absolutely lovely. He was it wasn't Manoli, it was Sterios. And he comes up to me and he says, "Are you still having the problem with the goats?" Which is where else, because we had a goat invasion last year, and I'd had to call the police because I had goats. So he remembered that, and he said, "Have you still got a problem with the goats?" The whole thing, I just love. And people say, what do you love about Greece? Well, it's being asked about my goat invasion when I'm doing my passport form. That to me,
that's
just
brilliant.
Is it in a nutshell.
Yeah. How good is that?
So,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
funny. I've got a cousin that lives in Igumanitsa. And every time
Oh,
the cops come
yeah,
around
yeah.
to his petrol station, the running joke is, because there's nothing to do there, he goes, "You just lock up the chickens on the way out."
Oh, yeah. Again, what charm. I mean, I love that. I don't know why I love it so much, but that's what I really love. It's perfect. It's
Quite
beautiful.
funny.
It's beautiful. It's real life.
I know you're very passionate with this, but we're going to talk about the Parthenon marble. So do you want to give us a
Yeah.
little bit of a rundown of what your view is and where you think we're at with it?
Well, my view very simply is that Elgin took them illegally, without permission. This kind of fictional thing that he had something called a firman, which was the official document from the Sultan, to say, yes, go ahead, rip the sculptures off, simply doesn't exist. I mean, it's not been found in the archive in Turkey. There's some letter that gave him permission to take copies and to do some molds. Absolutely not to rip them off. You know, it was illegal. He was a thief, and there's no two ways about it. He stole them, and they weren't. There are a lot of myths surrounding the marbles, which is what the British Museum has hidden behind for so long. And in fact, many people who go to the British Museum, there's nothing really to tell you the truth, which was that he wasn't taking them for our education to put in the British Museum, like some sort of 19th century philanthropist. He was taking them to stick up in his own stately home in Scotland. So it was a pure selfish act and an act of vandalism. But by the time he got home to the UK or to London, he was bankrupt. And his wife had left him, so he had to go through a divorce case. His life was a mess, and he needed to get some money, which is where the British Museum does come in, and they purchase them from Elgin. But they were buying stolen goods, and they can say it until they're blue in the face that it was a legal acquisition. I don't know if you have such language on your podcast, but it's pathetic, frankly. Yeah, it was legal. They bought them from Elgin. It's like a child sort of saying, he hit me. It's pathetic. So that's where they are in the British Museum, in a gloomy space. They were not well looked after. They were scrubbed, with wire wool to get rid of remaining colour. So they were further damaged by the treatment they had in the museum. All these clever people, like Geoffrey Robertson, who I'm sure you know well, Australian and lawyer and a very, very brilliant man, legally. He's written the most incredibly definitive book about the sculptures. It's a great book, Who Owns History, I think is the title. All these clever people, Stephen Fry, Christopher Hitchens, etc., etc., all the people on this committee, Paul Cartledge, endless academics, we all know the truth. So does the British Museum. They know the truth. But they're the British Museum, and they're a very conservative institution. They've agreed to have these talks, which they're having about some kind of loan, which, these talks have been going on for 3 years. Frankly, as I've said before in journalism, the Chinese can build a whole city in 2 years. The British Museum is stalling, having these so-called discussions. It's one of those causes where from time to time I'm just like utterly bored with them. It makes me ashamed to be British. It really does. Their mean-mindedness and their stubbornness and their inability to see how it makes them look, to hold on to something which is a part of a whole. We've got these pieces of jigsaw but we bought them, so we're keeping them. I mean, it just enrages me.
Yeah.
But that's my position. I'm quite articulate on paper when I write about it, which I often do. But I think, how many more times am I going to write this same argument that they were stolen? It's an act of absolute, not just generosity, but of righteousness to give them back and not
Yes.
loan them, not pretend it's a loan. There's a law that they hide behind, the 1963 Museums Act, which sort of is in concrete, apparently, a law. Who says a law is ever set in stone or concrete? It's nonsense. You can change laws. It happens all the time when it's needed. When something's wrong, you can adjust the law. So the law says that museums can't deaccession. But that's not a word used in normal parlance. It's just to stop them. It's for the museum to hide behind. So we're not allowed to just give away things that are in our collection. Well, guys, for heaven's sake, that's how I feel about it. Frankly,
Yeah.
for heaven's sake, just do the right thing. Very obvious what the right thing is. It's very obvious where they belong. Very obvious they were stolen. And just, if I speak another sentence, you'll have to cut it, because it will have a really, really, really rude word.
It wouldn't be the first time, let me tell you. But I mean, let's probably just finish on this then, because I mean, you're in very good company when it comes to people who share those thoughts. Stephen again, Paul, some colleagues an alum from Oxford as well.
Yeah.
Obviously us and and everyone. Very simply, do you think it will happen anytime soon?
I think it will happen. It won't be, I think, a sudden scales falling from the eyes moment on part of the museum, British Museum. Oh, actually, we've been wrong all this time. Have them back. It won't be like that, unfortunately. It'll be some kind of arrangement, which, as a Greek, will have to just swallow, tolerate that this is some kind of word. It's all language. So I think they will come back to Athens. I think it will tie in with this massive refurbishment that's happening at the British Museum. That will be the moment when physically they will need to be moved somewhere. Well, they're never going to give us the satisfaction. I wish. It's like someone dangling something on a string in front of you. Well, I'm not going to look at someone dangling that string. I'm just going to wait until they've actually got something to say, because it could drive you nuts on a daily basis. But I think it will happen, and I hope it will be in the next decade. It's not going to be tomorrow. Oh, well, that's all I can say. It will not be tomorrow. And apart from anything, it's an immense, immense undertaking to move such precious objets d'art. And it'll be months of physical whatever it takes. So it will happen. I'm sure it will happen under some language or other, and it won't be but it won't be tomorrow.
I think that's a positive way to sort of end. It will happen. We're all certain of it. Look, Victoria, we're so appreciative of your time. We have a whole list of other questions that we could be asking you, but we'll leave it for part 2 in the future when the next book comes and you can come and tell us what.
I'd love to come and tell you in person.
Absolutely.
That would be really cool.
We'd love to have you here.
I'd love to come.
Do you have plans to be here anytime soon?
I don't, but my nephew lives in Sydney and has the most wonderful life, as far as I can tell. He's been there for years now, and I'm always not threatening. He probably doesn't want his aunt to come and visit him now, does he? But
it's a pretty cool aunt.
Auntie Victoria would love to come and visit her nephew, and I have very.
Do you know where he lives?
Not exactly. Somewhere where he can see the sea. So he has a great life, great job, just wonderful life there, and has no intention of going back to Britain. So if I'm going to see him, I will have to go over. And as I say, when I went there on a travel trip, I absolutely loved it. I felt it was kind of very like being in Britain, but much warmer people. I think I might be sort of Greek Australian. That would be a good mix.
Yeah.
That would be the perfect
That's
mix.
you're in our territory now.
I would love to be there.
Good stuff.
Fantastic.
We'd love to
Okay,
have
and
you.
if-
If
when
you
you-
ever do come to Sydney,
Yeah, I will definitely
You
be
have
in
to look us up.
touch for sure. And I'll bring you a new bottle of one of these nice drinks.
Wonderful.
in a plastic bottle.
Yeah,
in
of
a plastic
course.
bottle.
Yes.
Well,
Okay.
Victoria, thank you so
It's
much.
great to talk to you.
As I said, absolute honour. uzotalk@outlook.com is the email. Follow us on social media at uzotalk and at uzo_talk on Instagram, also on YouTube. Nick Athanasiou and Victoria Hislop, thank you so much for joining us.
Great.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Thanks, Victoria.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Uzo Talk is produced, written and presented by Tom Skolarikas and Nick Athanasiou. Our theme music is written and played by Peter Apostolidis, with additional music from George Kalapidis and Bouzouki legend Thanasis Polykadriotis.
Ακολουθήστε μας στο Soundees, στο Spotify, στο Apple Podcasts και στο Google Podcasts.